They crossed into Earth's system expecting another easy victory in polite clothing. To the aliens, first contact was never really about discovery. It was about control. They had done it thousands of times before: arrive in orbit, impress a younger species, offer protection, and quietly fold that world into a galactic order no one was allowed to question. Earth was supposed to be another ceremony, another flag planted behind a smile. But the moment their lead ship cleared the outer dark, human sensors found them, tracked them, and classified their weapons before the aliens even finished scanning the sun. That was the first surprise. The second came when humanity answered their opening signal without fear, without awe, and without even a hint of confusion. And by the time the alien commander set foot in human territory, he had already begun to understand the terrible possibility his government refused to believe. They had not discovered a young species rising into the stars. They had just introduced themselves to the one civilization the galaxy had never been prepared to face again. Commander Sarek Tal stood at the forward glass of the Dominion vessel Quiet Law and watched Sol grow from a distant star into a fully mapped system. Around him, 3 escort cruisers kept perfect formation, their silver hulls gliding through the black like blades through water. The mission profile hanging above the bridge was simple and familiar: emerging civilization, moderate industrial development, early extrasolar capability, probable compliance through guided contact. Sarek had commanded 27 integration missions in his career. The pattern never changed. A species reached for the stars, sent weak transmissions into the void, and eventually someone from the Dominion arrived to bring order to the chaos before that species could become dangerous. That was the official language, anyway. The real language was simpler. Show strength. Offer peace. Remove independence. Confirm planetary classification, Sarek said. His sensor officer didn't look away from her station. Primary world contains oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, heavy ocean coverage, dense urbanization, and approximately 8.2 billion life signs. Multiple active colonies confirmed throughout local system. Early deep space infrastructure appears extensive for their estimated development curve. Sarek narrowed his eyes. Extensive how? A pause. More than projected, Commander. He did not like those words. Projected numbers were the foundation of every contact mission. Civilizations were supposed to move in patterns. They industrialized, fought, stabilized, built fragile networks beyond their homeworld, then met the Dominion and accepted guidance before they could build anything truly threatening. That was how the galaxy stayed peaceful. That was how the Dominion justified its power. But as Sol spread across the tactical display, Sarek saw ship lanes near Jupiter, mining arrays in the asteroid belt, orbital rings around Luna, and heat signatures from Mars that looked disturbingly close to active atmospheric engineering. On the other side of the system, Captain Elena Ward sat on the bridge of the UES Vanguard and watched a cluster of unknown contacts burn onto her screen near the Kuiper approach. The Vanguard was officially listed as a long-range patrol cruiser. Officially, it was also underarmed, lightly shielded, and designed for customs work. Anyone who believed that had never seen what happened when its outer hull plates rotated open. Range? Elena asked. Closing fast, said Lieutenant Noah Briggs. Drive signature is unlike anything in our database, but the deceleration profile is clean. They knew exactly where they wanted to enter. Military? Noah glanced at the spectral analysis and swallowed. If they're not military, then somebody spent a lot of money pretending to be. The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what those 4 contacts meant. For generations, humanity had argued, theorized, and quietly prepared for this exact moment. They just hadn't expected it to happen on a Tuesday patrol route past Saturn. Elena rose from her chair. Signal Fleet Command, Lunar Diplomatic Authority, and Earthside Strategic Council. Unknown extraterrestrial vessels have entered Sol. Initiate First Contact Protocol Level 1. And Noah. Yes, Captain. Wake up every silent array from here to Neptune. I want them watched from angles they don't know exist. He gave a sharp nod and turned back to his station. Within minutes, encrypted channels flared to life all across the human network. On Luna, Dr. Hannah Vale was pulled from a closed policy session and rushed into the glass-walled coordination center above Armstrong Station. She had spent 11 years designing the legal and diplomatic framework for First Contact. In simulations, she always had time to breathe before speaking to another species. In reality, she was still fastening her jacket as the first tactical feed appeared in front of her. "Who has visual?" she asked. "Vanguard," a technician replied. "Alien ships are holding outside the inner traffic lanes. No weapons lock. No hostile maneuvering." "For now," said Admiral Jonas Mercer from the main display. His face was hard, unreadable. "Doctor, if they open communications, the diplomatic channel is yours. If they cross our exclusion line without consent, they become my problem." Hannah gave him a look. "Let's hope they prefer conversation." Mercer didn't answer. The fact that he was already moving reserve groups toward Earth told her everything she needed to know. Back on the Quiet Law, Sarek studied the human patrol ship now centered on his display. It was smaller than his flagship, dark-hulled, sharp-angled, and deceptively plain. But Dominion sensors kept returning data that didn't fit. Its reactor output was unusually high for a vessel its size. Its thermal profile fluctuated in a pattern that suggested adaptive shielding. Worse, several sections of the hull returned no meaningful reading at all, as if they were built to conceal purpose by design. "A patrol craft doesn't need that much buried mass," Sarek murmured. "Perhaps they fear piracy," offered one of his aides. "In a home system?" Sarek asked. He gave the order anyway. "Transmit standard contact sequence." A pulse leapt from the Quiet Law toward the human ship, hydrogen line frequencies, prime numbers, elemental ratios, the oldest language between stars. It was how the Dominion announced itself to lesser civilizations, elegantly, unmistakably, and from a position of control. On the Vanguard, the signal washed across Noah's board in clean mathematical blocks. "They're opening with universal constants," he said. "Textbook First Contact material." Elena folded her arms. "Then let's not embarrass the species. Answer with the sequence, expand it, and append our own stellar mapping reference." Noah looked up. "Just that?" Elena's expression didn't change. "And let them know we understood it the first time." The response flashed back across the dark almost immediately, precise and calm. Sarek watched it arrive and felt the first real twist of unease. The humans had not hesitated. They had not replied with crude approximation. They had expanded the pattern, corrected one of the Dominion's old simplification conventions, and embedded a local coordinate framework sophisticated enough to show they understood the deeper structure behind the greeting itself. "Open voice translation," Sarek said. A moment later, the bridge filled with a warm, steady human voice. "This is Captain Elena Ward of the United Earth ship Vanguard. You have entered the Sol system under observation. State your identity and intentions. No fear. No trembling wonder. Just authority." Sarek straightened. "I am Commander Sarek Tal of the Oridian Dominion. We arrive in peace and in recognition of your species' emergence into interstellar space. We request formal contact with the leadership of your world." There was the slightest pause before the answer came. "Request acknowledged. We welcome peaceful contact. Be advised that this system is governed by established transit law, distributed command authority, and defense restrictions you will be expected to honor. Await escort instructions." Several officers on Sarek's bridge exchanged glances. One of them spoke before thinking. "They're issuing us conditions." Sarek silenced him with a look, but the damage was done. The room had felt it. These humans were speaking like peers. On Luna, Hannah Vale listened to the exchange twice before turning toward Admiral Mercer. Did you hear the way he phrased recognition of our emergence? Mercer nodded. Like he was granting us permission to exist. Exactly. Then we start polite, Mercer said. And we keep every gun in the system quietly pointed at his throat. The aliens were cleared to approach no farther than cislunar space under human escort. As Sarek's flotilla moved inward, the scale of human activity became impossible to ignore. Freight chains moved between orbital yards with machine precision. Civilian traffic alone was heavier than many Dominion sector capitals. Mars shimmered red beneath a lattice of mirrors and atmospheric injectors. The moon was no outpost, it was a fortress disguised as infrastructure. Everywhere Sarek looked, humanity had built quickly, densely, and with a confidence young species were not supposed to possess. Then came the detail that finally drove cold certainty into his chest. Commander, his sensor officer said softly, we are tracking military-grade emissions from at least 47 separate points in the system. Hidden batteries? Some. Others are mobile. Several appear to be watching us from beyond the range they should be able to maintain. Sarek stared at the blue world turning beneath its cloud cover. He had come expecting gratitude, dependence, and awe. Instead, he had found a civilization that had seen strangers arrive in warships and responded by measuring firing angles before saying hello. He sent a coded burst to Dominion High Command, his hands suddenly less steady than he wanted anyone to notice. Species designation revised. Human civilization exceeds behavioral model. Technological posture inconsistent with developmental estimate. Recommend extreme caution before proceeding with integration language. The reply came back only minutes later. Assessment noted. Continue contact as planned. Emerging powers often project confidence. Establish hierarchy early. Sarek read the message twice. Then he looked through the viewing glass at Earth, at its crowded orbits, its disciplined silence, its hidden strength, and the escort ships that had somehow slipped into position around his fleet without triggering a single alarm. For the first time in his career, Commander Sarek Tal stopped wondering how to introduce his people to a new civilization and started wondering what, exactly, the Dominion had just walked into. The alien delegation arrived at Armstrong Station beneath a wall of glass that looked out over the gray curve of the moon and the bright, impossible rise of Earth. Human planners had chosen the location carefully. Luna was neutral enough to look welcoming, fortified enough to survive a mistake, and symbolic enough to remind everyone listening that humanity did not wait to be invited into space. Commander Sarek Tal stepped down the ramp of his shuttle with 6 officials behind him, their formal armor polished to a mirror sheen. Waiting on the reception platform were Dr. Hannah Vale, Ambassador Miriam Cole, Admiral Jonas Mercer, and a line of civilian and military aides who wore practiced smiles and concealed sidearms. On behalf of the people of Earth and its colonies, Hannah said, stepping forward first, welcome to human space. Sarek bowed with the measured grace expected of a Dominion officer. On behalf of the Auridian Dominion, I recognize your species' arrival among the worlds. Again that word. Recognize. As if humanity had crossed some invisible border owned by someone else. Miriam Cole extended a hand anyway. Sarek hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. His skin was cooler than Hannah expected, almost metallic in texture, and his eyes never stopped moving. He was observing everyone, every doorway, every camera, every guard with a discipline too sharp for a peaceful envoy. The first hours passed in the language of diplomacy. Hospitality. Protocol. Carefully curated tours. Public statements written to sound historic and harmless. But under the polished surface, both sides were already taking each other apart. From the observation booth above the main hall, Colonel Isaac Reeve watched the aliens through layered security feeds. He had spent most of his career studying adversaries who smiled while positioning assets. The Dominion delegation reminded him of every dangerous government he had ever encountered, only calmer. See that? He asked, pointing to Sarek's wrist device. Analyst Priya Nasser zoomed in. Third passive sweep in 2 minutes. He's mapping the room. Not the room, Isaac said. The response times of our security detail. Down on the floor, Hannah guided the aliens past exhibits that summarized human history in broad strokes: early spaceflight, the unification treaties, the first extrasolar settlements, the development of gate-assisted transit. Sarek listened politely, but his composure slipped when they entered the industrial logistics wing and saw the real scale of Luna. Freight lines moved in stacked lanes through pressurized chambers the size of cities. Autonomous crawlers hauled refined metals toward shipyards buried beneath regolith shielding. Reactor signatures pulsed through the station like a second heartbeat. "This is a transport hub?" Sarek asked. "One of them," Hannah replied. He looked at her as if waiting for the correction. When none came, he turned toward Earth hanging beyond the glass. "How many off-world population centers do humans maintain?" Miriam answered this time. "Permanent populations in 16 systems. Major development in 9. Research and industrial presence in several more." One of the alien science officials actually stopped walking. 16. "We expanded quickly," Miriam said, as if discussing weather. Sarek kept his face under control, but Hannah saw it there, the first crack that wasn't caution, but shock. "And when did your species first establish faster-than-light navigation?" 42 years ago, said Admiral Mercer. The delegation fell silent. Not thoughtful silence. Disturbed silence. For the rest of the tour, the questions changed. They stopped asking what humans had learned and started asking how. Human fusion efficiency rates. Orbital defense architecture disguised as debris management. Nanomedical repair systems in military hospitals. Atmospheric engineering on Mars. Autonomous mining law in the belt. The aliens reacted to each answer with the same restrained discomfort, like people realizing a locked door on their own house had been opened from the inside. The strangest moment came in the medical wing. Dr. Lena Brooks, chief of Lunar Biosystems, demonstrated a surgical pod capable of rebuilding tissue after radiation trauma and catastrophic cellular damage. "The nanites are task-limited, of course," she explained. "They can't replicate freely. They just reconstruct according to the patient's baseline map." The oldest alien in Sarek's group leaned forward, his pupils narrowing. "You use adaptive molecular medicine in field conditions?" Lena smiled. "Only in emergencies. For standard military deployments we prefer less resource-intensive methods." The alien looked as if she had casually mentioned controlling weather with a pocket device. He turned to Sarek and spoke rapidly in his own language. Hannah didn't understand the words, but she understood tone. "Alarm. Real alarm." Afterward, while the guests were escorted to their secured quarters, Sarek requested a private channel to Dominion High Command. The room they gave him was comfortable, elegant, and almost certainly compromised. He knew it. That did not stop him. "Updated assessment," he said the moment the channel opened. "Human military, medical, and industrial capabilities surpass projected range by an unacceptable margin. They possess distributed colonies across multiple systems, advanced terraforming operations, and technologies our own frontier sectors do not field routinely. Recommend suspension of integration protocol pending strategic review." A thin-faced minister appeared in the transmission haze from the Dominion capital. "Your caution is noted, Commander. But your role is not strategic review. It is initial submission architecture. Young civilizations often achieve narrow technical breakthroughs. They remain unstable and vulnerable. Establish dependence before they consolidate." "They are already consolidated," Sarek said. The minister's expression hardened. "Then remind them what awaits isolated powers in an organized galaxy." The channel cut. Sarek stood in the dim room for several seconds without moving. He had expected arrogance from his government. He had not expected blindness. Humanity was doing its own listening. Beneath Armstrong Station, in a compartment not marked on any public map, Agent Priya Nasser removed one earpiece and stared at the decrypted alien burst on her screen. "You need to see this," she said. Isaac Reeves stepped over. "Tell me." "We cracked one of their short-range command relays. Not fully, but enough." She enlarged the translated fragments. "They are not discussing alliance terms. They're assessing compliance thresholds." Isaac read in silence. "Cultural absorption viability. Command hierarchy resistance. Containment feasibility if leadership rejects stewardship." He exhaled slowly. "Stewardship," he repeated. "There it is." Priya looked up. "It gets worse." Another line populated as the translation engine stabilized. "Military pacification remains acceptable if executed before species reaches autonomous parity." Isaac felt a cold pressure settle in his chest. This was not a first contact mission in the spirit humanity had prepared for. It was an intake procedure. A velvet-gloved conquest manual. On the surface level, the diplomatic dinner continued right on schedule. Miriam Cole asked measured questions about Dominion history. Sarek answered with polished formality. The Dominion, he explained, had preserved order across thousands of worlds for nearly 9 millennia. They had ended the age of chaotic interstellar wars. They had unified trade, law, and transit under a stable framework. They had guided less advanced civilizations into peaceful participation. "Guided," Hannah said softly. "How voluntary is that process?" Sarek met her eyes. For the first time since arriving, he seemed tired. "Voluntary outcomes are preferred." Mercer gave a faint humorless smile. "That's not what she asked." One of Sarek's aides spoke before he could stop him. "Independent military development among emergent species is inherently destabilizing. Supervision prevents unnecessary suffering." The room cooled by 10 degrees. Miriam set down her glass. "In human political language, that sounds a lot like conquest." No one answered immediately. Somewhere far below them, Armstrong Station hummed with the layered power of a civilization the Dominion had underestimated. Somewhere above them, Earth turned in silence while hidden defense grids tracked every alien ship in orbit. And in that moment, all the polite language finally began to collapse under the weight of what both sides already knew. The Dominion had not come looking for neighbors. They had come looking for subjects. And the worst part, Sarek realized as every human face across the table hardened by a fraction, was that humanity had just realized it too. By the next morning, the tone of first contact had changed so subtly that anyone watching the public feed might have missed it. The smiles were still there. The handshakes were still careful and historic. Statements about peace still rolled across every major network on Earth and through every official Dominion relay. But behind the cameras, both civilizations had stopped asking who the other was and started asking how dangerous the answer might be. The shift became impossible to hide when a second Dominion fleet arrived. It appeared beyond lunar orbit without warning to the public, 12 warships dropping from transit in a disciplined arc that immediately forced human tracking systems into silent overdrive. They were larger than Sarek's first group, heavier, and arranged in a kind of formation no one used for diplomacy unless they wanted the threat to be visible from a distance. Their lead vessel carried a signal requesting ceremonial docking rights for a new representative from the Dominion Central Authority. On the command deck beneath Armstrong Station, Admiral Mercer watched the formation settle onto tactical screens and felt every muscle in his body tighten. "They call this a diplomatic reinforcement?" he asked. Captain Elena Ward, patched in from the Vanguard, didn't bother hiding her disgust. "If that's diplomacy, then I'd hate to see a parade." Dr. Hannah Vale read the identification packet as it finished translation. Legate Vale Corps. Senior Envoy of the Dominion Civic Directorate. Mercer glanced at her. "Civic Directorate? That sounds softer than Occupation Bureau," Isaac Reeve muttered from the back of the room. No one argued. Permission to enter inner orbit was delayed while Earth's leadership met under emergency protocol. The debate did not last long. Refusing the legate entirely might trigger a confrontation before humanity had fully mapped Dominion capabilities. Accepting him risked normalizing intimidation as procedure. In the end, President Talia Rowan made the choice herself. "Let him come," she said over encrypted conference. "But not to Earth. Luna only. Under our terms. Full sensor transparency, restricted movement, no armed escort beyond ceremonial side personnel, and every ship he brought stays outside designated defense lanes." Mercer gave a single nod. "And if he declines?" Talia's expression never changed. "Then we have our answer." Vale Corps accepted. He arrived 6 hours later in a shuttle black as obsidian, descending toward Armstrong Station while millions on Earth watched the live feed. He was taller than Sarek, broader in the shoulders, and dressed in layered robes threaded with metallic insignia that implied political authority backed by force. Behind him came armored attendants who carried themselves less like aides and more like bodyguards pretending to be ceremonial. Hannah met him at the reception threshold with Ambassador Miriam Cole at her side. "Legate Corps," she said. "Welcome to Armstrong." Vale inclined his head just enough to avoid being called rude. "Dr. Vale." "Ambassador." Humanity honors itself by receiving the Dominion with such urgency. Miriam's smile was perfect. Urgency usually means one side brought 12 warships. For an instant, one of Vale's attendants stiffened. The legate himself only looked past her through the station glass toward Earth. "Stable order requires visible strength. Surely your people understand that." "We do," Mercer said as he approached. "That's why ours is usually invisible." Vale turned to him slowly. Sarek, standing a step behind, said nothing at all. The formal session began in the high conference chamber overlooking the South Crater fields. Every line had been scripted in advance, every translation matrix triple-checked, every angle of the room selected so no delegation would physically dominate the other. It still took less than 15 minutes for the truth to come out. "The Dominion has reviewed Commander Tau's preliminary observations," Vale said, fingers folded over the table. "Humanity has progressed farther than most newly emergent species. This is commendable. It also makes your integration into the greater order more urgent." Hannah didn't blink. "Define integration." Vale answered as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Standard accession. External defense transfers to Dominion coordination. Independent fleet expansion is limited by treaty. Advanced research enters supervised exchange. Extrastellar settlement rights are regularized under Dominion law. In return, humanity receives protected status, trade access, and representation through the appropriate channels." Miriam leaned back slowly. "That isn't an alliance." "It is peace," Vale replied. "No," Mercer said. "It's disarmament with branding." Sarek's gaze dropped to the table. He looked like a man hearing his own fears read aloud. Vale kept his tone calm, but the room had changed. Independent militarization by a rapidly expanding species creates instability. The Dominion exists to prevent that. Hannah folded her hands. "Humanity governs itself. We do not surrender military command, scientific autonomy, or settlement rights to an external power." The legate studied her for a long second. "Then I suspect your species does not yet understand the dangers of the galaxy." Mercer's reply came without pause. "And I suspect your government has mistaken caution for weakness." While the talk stalled, other meetings continued in parallel. Dominion technical observers were escorted through human facilities under carefully controlled access, and everywhere they went, the same thing happened. Curiosity gave way to disbelief. Disbelief curdled into unease. At the Helios Fusion Complex, Chief Engineer Mara Bennett explained the balancing system of a compact stellar core reactor designed for colony support and military redundancy. The Dominion physicist listening to her interrupted twice to ask whether the display was theoretical. "It's running now," Mara said. The alien stared through the reinforced glass at the containment well. "At that efficiency? 91.4 on this model. We're hoping to improve the field harmonics next quarter." The physicist turned pale enough for the human technicians to notice. Dominion reactors, it turned out, had never come close. On Mars, the visiting scientific team was flown over atmospheric processors stretching for hundreds of kilometers across the Vias chain. Clouds were beginning to hold over regions that had been barren dust a generation earlier. Water release schedules were coordinated by orbital mirrors and subterranean heat arrays. A Dominion biologist watched the red horizon with naked fear. "You are altering a dead world's climate at planetary scale," she whispered. Professor Nia Shah smiled proudly. "Not dead. Just stubborn." Back on Luna, Isaac Reeve received another report from Priya Nasser, and this one hit harder than the first. They had broken a larger block of Dominion strategic traffic. The language was polished, bureaucratic, and impossible to misread. If voluntary accession fails, proceed to containment phase. Key objectives: seize transit infrastructure, disable command satellites, neutralize fleet coordination before species-wide mobilization. Isaac read the lines twice, then looked up. They were always planning the next step. Priya nodded. "And there's one more thing." She put a second file on the screen. It wasn't current intelligence. It was archival pattern analysis cross-referenced with human exploratory records from the outer colonies. At first it looked like nothing more than old settlement disputes and failed surveys. Then the markers aligned. "Those worlds," Isaac said quietly. "Yeah," Priya replied. 17 of them. All inside or adjacent to current Dominion space. All show traces of pre-modern human genetic residue, material culture, or architectural signatures. That's impossible. That's what Dr. Owen Sato said. Then he ran the dating again. Owen was waiting in a sealed lab beneath the station when Isaac and Hannah arrived. He looked exhausted in the way only a scientist on the edge of a career-ending discovery could look. "Tell me I'm wrong," he said before either of them sat down. "Please." He tapped the projection controls. Star maps blossomed above the table. Then came artifact scans, alloy fragments, linguistic symmetry matches, skeletal traces, and settlement geometry from ruins recovered years ago on fringe worlds no one had considered important. These sites were flagged as non-human because they predate our recognized interstellar era by thousands of years, Owen said. But the genomic residue matches us. Not approximately. Not convergently. Human. The structural ratios are human too. So are the encoded numerics. Hannah stared at the rotating maps. "How old?" Owen swallowed. "Old enough that if this is real, humanity did not spread into the stars 42 years ago." Isaac's voice dropped. "Then when?" Owen looked from one face to the other, his own expression caught between wonder and dread. "Long enough ago," he said, "that the Dominion may not have discovered us at all." In the conference chamber above, Vale Core was still speaking of guidance, stability, and proper order. On Earth, military planners were quietly shifting fleets out of dock. In Dominion space, encrypted directives were already moving toward war. And beneath the moon, under cold lights and ancient dust, the first hard evidence was beginning to suggest something neither civilization was ready to face. Humanity might not be a new power in the galaxy. It might be an old one returning. Far from Sol, beneath the luminous domes of the Dominion capital world, the High Chamber convened an emergency session for the first time in almost 2 centuries. The hall had been built to overwhelm anyone who entered it. Tier after tier of silver platforms rose beneath a ceiling filled with moving constellations, each point of light marking a system under Dominion authority. Normally, the chamber radiated certainty. This time it pulsed with fear. Legate archives streamed above the central dais while ministers, admirals, and sector governors spoke over one another in controlled but unmistakable panic. At the center stood Chancellor Maler Voss, the political voice of Dominion expansion, his pale hands clasped behind his back as Commander Serrik Tau's report scrolled in the air. "Read the final line again," Voss said. An aide obeyed. "Human civilization exceeds all projected developmental thresholds. Independent military and industrial capacity are sufficient to resist standard accession doctrine. Further coercive language may provoke strategic escalation." The chamber erupted. Then he has lost his nerve. A frontier commander grows sentimental after one strong signal exchange. If the species has colonies, cut the lanes and force compliance before they disperse further. Admiral Sirene Holt waited until the noise broke against itself. "You are all making the same mistake," she said. "You still believe this is a local irregularity. It isn't. Their infrastructure density is too high. Their reactor quality is too clean. Their fleet signatures are masked well enough to imply doctrine, not improvisation. They planned for hostile contact." A governor from the interior ring scoffed. "Every new species claims defiance when first confronted." Holt turned to him without emotion. "Every new species we have encountered thought our oldest weapons were miracles. These humans showed no awe at all." That silenced the room. On Luna, the diplomatic facade was cracking in front of everyone involved, even if the public still saw polished statements and historical language. President Talia Rowan had arrived from Earth under tight security, and her first private briefing lasted less than 10 minutes before she stopped the presentation and looked directly at Isaac Reeve. "So just say it clearly," she said. "What are they?" Isaac stood beside the central table while Priya Nasser brought up decrypted traffic, colonial maps, and Dominion legal codes stripped of their ceremonial language. "They call themselves Guardians. They are not Guardians. They absorb military control, regulate scientific development, cap colonial expansion, and reorganize political systems until local leadership exists only with their approval. Every species they guide becomes dependent." Priya enlarged a set of translated directives. "And if guidance fails, they move to containment. Transit seizure. Orbital disruption. Command decapitation." Talia read in silence. "An empire." "Yes," Isaac said. "A very old one. And from the wording, one that has not had to fight a truly equal opponent in a very long time." Hannah Vale stood near the window, arms folded. "That may be why they're so rattled." Mercer gave a grim nod. "Or why they might hit us hard before we force them to adapt." The next confrontation came disguised as ceremony. Legate Vale Corps requested a technical exchange of mutual respect, a controlled demonstration of defensive and power systems meant, according to official language, to deepen trust between civilizations. No one on the human side believed that explanation for a second. Vale wanted a ranking. He wanted to see where the Dominion stood relative to humanity in the one-language empires never stopped speaking. The demonstration took place in a secured crater range on the far side of the moon. Dominion engineers rolled out a towering weapons platform mounted on gravitic supports, its core glowing with compressed violet plasma. Human observers watched from behind reinforced glass while Dominion personnel moved around the machine with solemn pride. "This is a Helion Lance battery," Vale announced. "A standard outer defense platform. Precise, scalable, and sufficient to disable any rogue fleet element or hostile station." The beam fired an instant later. Across the range, a captured asteroid segment used as a target vanished in a bloom of molten white and drifting ash. Even the human observers felt the force of it through the shielded wall. Vale looked toward Mercer. "Order survives because dangerous powers are reminded of consequences." Mercer didn't react. "Impressive." Vale's eyes narrowed slightly. He had expected more than that. "Would your people care to demonstrate a defensive equivalent?" he asked. Mercer glanced toward Captain Elena Ward, who was overseeing the human side of the range. Elena touched 2 fingers to her earpiece, listened to a brief confirmation, and stepped forward. "Of course," she said. A compact emitter array rose from the lunar surface 2 kilometers away. It looked almost disappointingly small beside the Dominion weapon, just a ring of matte black pylons surrounding an empty space. The translation feed identified it as a mobile civilian-grade shield lattice adapted from colony infrastructure. Vale actually smiled at that. "Civilian?" Elena nodded. "Military hardware would be excessive for a diplomatic exchange." The Dominion officers exchanged amused glances. "Fire when ready," Mercer said. The Helion lance charged again, brighter this time, and released a second cutting spear of plasma straight into the center of the human array. For one impossible second, the blast should have torn through the target zone. Instead, the space inside the ring folded with a faint shimmer, and the beam simply disappeared. No explosion. No impact wash. No visible strain. The energy had been absorbed so cleanly that the range fell silent. One of the Dominion engineers took a step backward. Vale stared. "What happened?" Elena kept her voice level. "Field inversion and redirection. The shield translated the energy out of phase and dispersed it as harmless thermal load." "That is not possible," the engineer whispered. "It is," Elena said. "We've been using second-generation versions on our frontier worlds for 12 years. No one from the Dominion spoke for several seconds. Sarek, standing behind Vale, looked less shocked than exhausted. As if each new revelation only confirmed a conclusion he had already reached and been ordered to ignore. That night, 3 things happened at once. On the Dominion flagship Resolute Crown, Vale Corps sent an emergency encrypted packet to the High Chamber. Human defensive capability invalidates current accession assumptions. Species may have achieved or inherited technologies beyond Dominion parity. Recommend immediate fleet mobilization and strategic containment before wider activation occurs. In a hidden intelligence bunker beneath Armstrong Station, Priya intercepted fragments of the outbound burst and handed them straight to Isaac with a face that had gone pale. "They're moving from pressure to preparation," she said. "This isn't theory anymore." Isaac scanned the translated lines and immediately opened a secure channel to Mercer. "They are asking for mobilization authority. If they haven't already received it, they will soon." At the same time, beneath the southern excavation vaults of Luna, Dr. Owen Sato and Dr. Amara Chen made a discovery that made the military crisis feel suddenly larger than either side had imagined. The ruins found beneath Luna's basalt layers had already produced impossible material, age-defiant alloys, encoded latticework, and inscriptions whose mathematical structure was unmistakably human. But one chamber had remained sealed behind a lock no modern method could open without destroying what was inside. The breakthrough came by accident. A technician carrying a blood-marked sample case brushed the inner threshold, and the door responded instantly. Now Owen stood in a room untouched for untold ages, staring at walls alive with dormant light. Amara approached a central console and froze. "Owen, the script." He moved beside her. It was ancient, but not alien. Its structure mirrored proto-human symbolic grammar in ways that should not have been possible. More disturbing still, the translation software wasn't really translating it. It was recognizing it. Lines appeared across the panel. Inheritance chamber online. Genetic continuity confirmed. Custodian protocol suspended pending return of authorized descendants. Amara's mouth went dry. Authorized descendants? Owen looked around the chamber at the sleeping machines, the elegant geometry, the impossible certainty built into every line of it. "This place wasn't abandoned," he said quietly. "It was left waiting." He activated another panel. A star map flared to life, spreading across the room in brilliant arcs. Systems lit up one after another far beyond Sol, far beyond any current human borders, each marked with the same ancient symbol. Human worlds. Not one or two. Hundreds. And at the center of the map, above a region of the galactic core modern navigation still treated as unstable and mostly inaccessible, a line of text appeared that neither of them could breathe through for several seconds. Seat of the First Human Dominion. Owen stared at it, the irony almost too sharp to process. Out in orbit, a foreign empire was deciding whether humanity had become too dangerous to control. Beneath the moon, the evidence suggested something even worse for them. Humanity might have built the template empires were copied from. The chamber beneath Luna did not feel like an archaeological site anymore. It felt like a machine that had gone quiet only because it had been told to wait. As more of the ancient systems came online, the walls brightened in slow pulses that matched no modern power source. Lines of dormant code unfolded into three-dimensional displays. Entire layers of the facility that had been buried, sealed, or hidden behind blank stone began revealing corridors, vaults, and transit shafts that should not have existed beneath any known lunar survey. Dr. Owen Sato stood in the center of it all with a translator rig hanging and used around his neck, because the strangest part was no longer that the language was ancient. It was that human minds seemed to understand it faster than software did. Amara Chen moved from one floating panel to another, her voice tight with disbelief. It's not just architecture. This place is connected to something larger. I'm seeing references to remote infrastructure, defensive lattices, transit anchors, inheritance vaults. How large? Owen asked. Amara swallowed. System-wide at minimum. Maybe more. On the nearest display, the star map kept expanding. Sol was only one node in a sprawling web of ancient human settlements spread across regions that modern humanity had never claimed, and many of them were inside present Dominion territory. Some symbols flashed amber, others red, and a handful pulsed gold with a status marker the translator rendered as dormant sovereign assets. Owen stared at the phrase. Sovereign assets, he repeated quietly. No young civilization leaves language like that behind. Up above, in the controlled calm of Armstrong Station, that same truth was beginning to spread through human leadership like an electric current. President Talia Rowan listened as Hannah Vale, Mercer, Isaac Reeve, and the Senior Science Council laid out the evidence. Ancient genetic continuity. Human ruins beyond known settlement history. A buried lunar complex responding specifically to modern human biology. The room was silent when the final image appeared, a recovered inscription referencing the first human dominion. Talia leaned back slowly. So while the dominion in orbit is trying to decide how to absorb us, they may have stumbled into the descendants of a civilization older than theirs, Isaac finished. Mercer's eyes stayed on the tactical feed. That doesn't make them less dangerous right now. No, Hannah said. It may make them more dangerous. If they realize what we're learning, they'll stop trying to manage us and start trying to eliminate the problem. That possibility was no longer theoretical. On the Dominion capital, Chancellor Mailer Voss had already moved the High Chamber into closed session. The public language was stability review. The private language was fear. Sarek's reports, Vale Corps' emergency requests, and the raw data from the lunar demonstration had shattered the assumptions the Dominion had built its power on. They were supposed to be the ceiling. They were supposed to be what every younger civilization eventually ran into and failed to surpass. But humanity had not reacted like a species discovering power overhead. Humanity had acted like a species evaluating a rival. Admiral Sirene Holt stepped into the center of the chamber and activated a strategic display of Sol. Human ship lanes, orbital yards, resource chains, and thermal signatures spread across the room in cold blue light. This is not accidental growth, she said. Their colonization tempo, industrial layering, and system defense dispersion indicate long-form strategic planning. They do not build like a civilization improvising its rise. They build like one expecting interruption. Minister Cale Vore dismissed it with a wave. Then they are paranoid. Holt turned toward him. No. They were right. A murmur spread through the chamber. Chancellor Voss narrowed his eyes. State your recommendation. Fleet mobilization across the western sectors. Immediate positioning around all known human colonies. Covert seizure plans for transit infrastructure. If they resist integration, we deny them maneuver room before they scale further. And if Sarek's caution is correct, another counselor asked. If they are stronger than we estimate? Holt's answer came without warmth. Then every hour we delay belongs to them. Back in Seoul, Commander Sarek Tal was no longer sleeping. He stood alone in his assigned quarters looking down at Earth, replaying every human response in his mind. Not boastful. Not reckless. Controlled. That was what troubled him most. Primitive powers often looked bold because they didn't know enough to fear consequences. Humanity was not like that. Humanity was measuring every move, every phrase, every orbit. Even their hospitality had perimeter logic built into it. A secure chime sounded behind him. Vale Corps entered without ceremony. You've been vindicated, Vale said. Sarek did not turn. That implies anyone listened. Vale ignored the remark. The chamber is mobilizing. Sarek finally faced him. Then we are making the one mistake I hope to avoid. Vale's expression hardened. Do not confuse concern with weakness, Commander. If these humans are allowed unrestricted expansion, every dependent world in our sphere will hear of it. Every client species will ask why they surrendered what humanity kept. Order depends on precedent. Sarek gave a humorless breath that was not quite a laugh. There it is. Not peace. Not safety. Precedent. Vale stepped closer. You have spent too long among them. No, Sarek said. I have spent just enough time among them to understand what you have not. They are not waiting to be arranged into our hierarchy. And if you force this, you may discover they are more dangerous under pressure than in negotiation. Vale said nothing for a moment. Then he lowered his voice. A directive has been issued. If voluntary accession fails, we move to containment. Sarek felt the last of his diplomatic optimism collapse inside him. Containment of soul. Containment of humanity. The first signs came from beyond the moon. Human deep-watch arrays detected Dominion fleet movements rippling across nearby sectors in patterns too synchronized to be routine. Supply tenders disappeared from commercial routes and reappeared near military staging points. Civilian transits were quietly rerouted around systems with human interests. On paper, nothing had happened. In practice, war architecture was unfolding in slow motion. Mercer addressed the Joint Strategic Council from the command tier under Armstrong. They're shaping the board. Not attacking yet. Positioning. Elena Ward's feed appeared beside him from the vanguard, her face lit by tactical projections. Outer pickets confirm at least 4 new Dominion formations moving within jump reach of our colony lanes. They're trying not to trip any obvious threshold. That means they want options, Isaac said. No, Mercer corrected. It means they expect to use them. Then the message from Luna's lower vaults reached the command room, and for a heartbeat the military crisis had to compete with something even larger. Owen Sato appeared on the main screen, breathing hard, with amber light flickering behind him. You need to hear this exactly as I'm saying it. The chamber has opened additional systems. We've confirmed linked installations on Mars, in the belt, and at least 3 outer system coordinates. They are keyed to human genetic markers. Not just access, command authorization. Talia Rowan looked up sharply. Command for what? Owen hesitated, and that hesitation frightened everyone more than any immediate answer. Defense networks, he said at last. Transit control. Automated manufacturing. Possibly dormant war assets. We don't know the full scale yet. Mercer stepped toward the screen. Can they be activated? They may already be waking up. As if the universe had been waiting for the line, every tactical display in the room changed at once. A storm of signals ignited across Sol. Buried stations beneath Mars lit up one after another. Silent masses hidden inside asteroid interiors began transmitting identification bursts in protocols no human navy had ever used. Dark satellites long mistaken for dead rock unfolded around the outer planets, their surfaces peeling open to reveal geometry so advanced that even human analysts needed seconds to realize they were looking at weapons. Not human-made. Human left. In orbit above Luna, Dominion sensors caught the same surge. Alarms rippled across Vale Corps' flagship. Sarek watched the readouts flood red and felt his blood go cold. "Commander," his sensor officer whispered, "those signatures are ancient, but they're recognizing the humans as authorized command entities." Sarek stared at the emerging lattice around Sol, at the impossible precision of systems older than the Dominion itself coming awake for the descendants of their builders. The aliens had come to judge whether humanity was fit to join the galaxy. Now the entire solar system was beginning to answer with a terrifying question of its own. Who, exactly, had been ruling it before the Dominion ever existed? What happened next was so far beyond anyone's planning models that both civilizations needed several minutes just to decide whether they were watching a system failure, a weapons deployment, or history waking up. Across Sol, ancient installations lit the dark one by one. Around Mars, objects catalogued for decades as inert mineral masses shifted orbit in perfect synchronization and unfolded into ringed platforms wrapped in layered energy fields. In the asteroid belt, mining crews reported buried structures rising from inside planetoids that had been drilled for years without revealing anything larger than stone. Beyond Jupiter, long-dead relays hidden in the magnetic shadow of the gas giant began transmitting command bursts toward Earth, Luna, and human fleet anchors using an encoded architecture no modern nation had ever built, but every human translation engine kept flagging with the same impossible designation. Ancestral Network. On the command tier under Armstrong Station, no one spoke for several seconds. Admiral Mercer watched a dead channel near Callisto come alive, handshake with 17 newly awakened platforms, and then establish an encrypted defensive mesh across half the outer system. "Tell me that's ours," he said. Captain Elena Ward answered from the Vanguard. "If by ours you mean built by modern human governments, absolutely not. If you mean responding to us anyway, then yes, sir. Very much yes. Can we control it? We're trying." Beneath Luna, in the inheritance chamber, Dr. Owen Sato was beginning to understand why the systems were responding so quickly. Human operators weren't simply deciphering the interfaces. In many cases, they were anticipating them. A Marichan crossed from one glowing console to another, fingers moving over light patterns she had never studied and should not have recognized. "I know that sounds insane," she said, not taking her eyes off the display. "But I can tell what these prompts mean before the language package confirms them." Around the room, military technicians and civilian scientists were experiencing the same thing in different forms. Some understood the logic of the machinery instinctively. Others could predict which controls would unlock which pathways. A few reacted before warnings even sounded, as if something buried deep in the architecture of human memory was syncing with the room itself. Owen checked their bioscans twice before he finally called up to command. "It's not just access authorization," he said. "The systems are reading us at a biological level. They were designed for continuity. Genetic continuity." On Mars, Professor Nia Shah was already seeing the same pattern from another angle. Volunteers exposed to the ancient processing core under Utopia Station were showing measurable neurological shifts, not damage, not instability, but heightened integration. Reaction speed increased. Pattern recognition spiked. Long-range memory indexing sharpened in ways that looked less like mutation and more like dormant capability switching back on. When Nia showed the data to Colonel Isaac Reeve, he read it in silence. "You're saying contact with ancient infrastructure is changing people," he said. Nia chose her words carefully. I'm saying it may be restoring something that was always there. The Dominion saw enough of this to panic. On the bridge of the Resolute Crown, Legate Vale Corps watched tactical icons multiply around Sol until the system map looked less like a collection of planets and more like a fortress remembering its shape. Worse, every new platform that activated ignored Dominion hails and responded only to human proximity signatures. Some scanned Dominion ships openly. Others simply targeted them and waited. How many weapons platforms? Vale demanded. Unknown, said his operations chief. They're coming online faster than we can classify them. Some of them may be older than any military architecture in Dominion archives. Sarek, standing at the rear command rail, spoke in a voice so controlled it was nearly flat. Withdraw the outer line. Vale turned sharply. We are not retreating. You brought a coercion fleet into the middle of a system that is revealing unknown legacy defenses by the minute, Sarek said. Call it what you like, but if one of those platforms interprets your posture as hostile, we may not get a second warning. As if summoned by the argument, a pulse rolled through the tactical net. One ancient station near the moon projected a sphere of pale light around itself and then sent a single directed scan through the hulls of every Dominion vessel present. Shields flickered across the alien formation. Weapons safeties glitched. 2 targeting arrays shut down completely and had to be rebooted manually. The bridge crew froze. That platform just touched our systems, the operations chief whispered. No, Sarek said, staring at the display. It inspected them. In the high chamber on the Dominion capital, Chancellor Voss received the first composite report from Sol and felt the balance of every assumption beneath him begin to fail. He had built his political career on certainty, certainty that the Dominion was the final authority, certainty that all rising species eventually bent, certainty that expansion and stability were the same thing viewed from different levels. But the stream from Sol showed a civilization not only resisting accession, but waking an ancient military inheritance the Dominion had no framework to counter. Have we identified the source civilization? Voss asked. An archivist at the edge of the chamber hesitated, then enlarged a series of recovered comparative symbols pulled from old Dominion archaeological black files. Most counselors had never seen those files. They had been buried for a reason. The markings correspond to prohibited ruins found on multiple worlds over the last 3,000 years, the archivist said. Sites our predecessors classified as belonging to the precursor sovereigns. The room tightened. Admiral Sirain Holt went still. That classification was theoretical. It was political, the archivist corrected quietly. The evidence was too fragmented to acknowledge safely. Voss looked up. Say what you mean. The archivist swallowed. The old ruins may not have belonged to a vanished non-human precursor. They may have belonged to ancient humanity. No one in the chamber moved. Back in Sol, humanity's military didn't wait for certainty. Mercer ordered all fleets to full defense posture while maintaining strict fire discipline. Colony commands were told to seal transit nodes, harden orbital infrastructure, and prepare for synchronized cyber and kinetic disruption. Public channels were still fed calm language, but private traffic across human space had shifted completely. No one was asking if the Dominion might become hostile anymore. They were planning for when. The first direct confrontation came at New Carthage, a frontier colony 2 jumps beyond Epsilon Indi. Dominion corvettes arrived under customs authority and attempted to take control of the local transit gate for safety inspection. Governor Elias Boone refused. For 37 tense minutes, the standoff held. Then the ancient station buried under the colony's polar ice woke up. Human defenders never touched a control. The station simply recognized a threat pattern, projected a shield over the colony's gate, and disabled every Dominion ship in orbit with a wave of directed interference so precise it left life support running and weapons dead. By the time the transmission reached Sol, similar incidents were unfolding at 3 other human worlds. The pattern was clear. The old network was not random. It was strategic. It understood human space, identified Dominion coercion, and was choosing sides before modern humanity had fully learned how to speak to it. That realization changed everything. Late in the cycle, President Talia Rowan descended to the lunar chamber herself. She stood in the center of the glowing room while the star map turned above her and ancient systems pulsed in response to her presence. Owen brought up a recovered fragment from the deepest archive tier, one line at a time. Not empire fallen. Stewardship suspended. Lineage dispersed by design. Return authority contingent upon demonstrated maturity. Talia read the words twice. Demonstrated maturity, she repeated. Amara nodded slowly. Whoever our ancestors were, they didn't lose this power. They put it away. And now? Talia asked. No one answered immediately. They didn't need to. Outside the chamber, a foreign empire was mobilizing. Across human space, forgotten defenses were awakening. And somewhere in the depths of ancient human design, something vast was clearly deciding whether modern humanity had become worthy of inheriting what had been left behind. The Dominion did not call it a declaration of war. Empires almost never do. They wrapped it in cleaner language, safer language, language built to make violence sound like maintenance. The order that left the high chamber was designated a containment action, temporary and regrettable, necessary to preserve galactic stability in the face of a rapidly escalating species anomaly. But when Admiral Siraine Holt received the final command packet and looked at the fleet assignments attached to it, she understood the truth immediately. This was war. Not open yet, not public, not honest, but war all the same. Across Dominion space, task forces detached from trade corridors and regrouped along human-accessible lanes. Carrier groups were moved under the pretense of customs enforcement. Long-range interdiction ships repositioned around systems known to host human settlements. In the official record, it was a security review. In every operational detail that mattered, it was an attempt to cut humanity apart before the species fully understood what it had inherited. In Sol, Admiral Mercer saw the pattern form in real time. They're not probing anymore, he said, standing over a tactical map lit with converging vectors. They're shaping kill zones around our colonies. Captain Elena Ward patched in from the Vanguard with fresh intercept data. 3 Dominion formations have moved inside response distance of our outer settlements. Another group is shadowing the trade lanes to New Carthage and Helios Gate. They're trying to isolate us before they hit command infrastructure. President Talia Rowan listened without speaking. Around the room, military staff and civilian leaders watched the same map and understood the same thing. First contact was over. Whatever came next would decide more than territory. It would decide whether humanity entered the galaxy as a free civilization or as a managed possession. Then we stopped waiting for permission to defend ourselves, Talia said. The order moved fast. Human fleets shifted from dispersed patrol posture into layered defense. Civilian traffic was rerouted under emergency law. Orbital weapons hidden under commercial registrations unlocked military authority. On worlds that had never imagined themselves close to a front line, governors received sealed directives to activate continuity bunkers and harden transit hubs. But the biggest change was harder to measure. It was happening inside people. At the Luna Inheritance Chamber, engineers who had spent hours near the ancient systems were showing impossible adaptation speeds. Pilots interfacing with legacy navigation arrays could absorb star maps in seconds. Security teams assigned to the excavation site reacted to movement before cameras caught it. Medical staff logged elevated cognition, accelerated reflexes, and bursts of intuitive pattern recognition that no modern enhancement program had ever produced. Professor Nia Shah reviewed the newest data with growing awe. This isn't mutation, she told Owen Sato. It's expression. These traits were already present. The ancient systems are waking them up. Owen looked through the chamber glass at a line of Marines standing motionless beside a newly active console. So our ancestors didn't just leave us technology. No, Nia said quietly. They left us unfinished instructions. One of the Marines, Sergeant Lucas Reed, turned toward a sealed wall no one had been able to open before. He hadn't touched the controls. He hadn't even looked at the panel. But he knew, with sudden and frightening certainty, what was about to happen. "Everyone back," he said. The wall split down the center and folded outward in silence. Behind it waited a weapons vault. Rows of compact devices sat in suspended fields, each one smooth, black, and geometrically perfect in a way no modern machine shop could duplicate. Above them, ancient text glowed into readable form. Defensive cadre authorization available upon oath validation. Lucas stared at the words and felt a pulse of recognition that did not belong to any memory from his life. Not a vision. Not a hallucination. More like an instinct returning after being absent so long he had forgotten it existed. On the Dominion flagship Resolute Crown, Commander Serrick Tau was watching the same crisis unfold from the wrong side of it. Vale Corps had stopped pretending diplomacy still mattered. The legate's command staff now spoke openly of compliance timelines, orbital seizure, and demonstration strikes meant to break human confidence before ancient systems could be fully understood. Serrick looked at the projected attack lattice and felt something close to despair. "You are assuming their response will remain linear." Vale did not look at him. "Every species responds linearly under concentrated pressure." "Have you still not learned anything here?" Serrick asked. "These people are not improvising panic. Their system defenses are older than our state archives. Their military has shown restraint where another civilization might already have fired. That should concern you more than defiance." Vale's expression turned cold. "And your concern should be obedience, Commander." Serrick said nothing after that, but later, alone in a secure channel compartment, he made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He opened a covert transmission line to Armstrong Station and sent the one warning his government had forbidden. Containment order confirmed. Simultaneous actions expected against Sol and all major human colonies. Main objective likely seizure of transit command and fleet coordination. You have less time than they want you to know. When the message reached Isaac Reeve, he read the source stamp twice. "Serrick," he said. Hannah Vale looked over his shoulder. "He just burned his career." Isaac's face hardened. "If his government finds out, it'll cost more than that." The first battle began before either of them could say anything else. A Dominion strike group dropped into the edge of Sol under active jamming cover, too close and too fast for civilian channels to track. Their target was not Earth itself, at least not yet. It was the command web around Luna, the one place where human diplomacy, fleet control, and ancient system activation had begun to overlap. Disable Luna, cut the brain from the body, and the rest of the species might still be forced into surrender. Alarms flooded Armstrong Station. "Multiple hostile vectors," a controller shouted. "They're bypassing the diplomatic perimeter." Mercer was already moving. "All batteries free. Vanguard, intercept pattern Delta. Bring the masked platforms online." For the first time since first contact, humanity stopped hiding the full shape of its local defense fleet. Dark structures unfolded from behind cargo yards and communications shells. Patrol cruisers shed civilian signatures and revealed layered armor beneath. Missile nests buried under lunar regolith blasted open. Above them all, ancient stations shifted position with impossible grace, aligning in a network that seemed to think faster than the humans trying to command it. The Dominion opened fire first. Lances of white energy carved across lunar space toward Armstrong's outer shield net. Human interceptors surged to meet them, and behind those interceptors came something neither side had planned, the old network taking initiative. A sphere of gold light erupted around Luna. The first Dominion volley hit the field and bent away, not scattered, not blocked, but redirected along controlled vectors into empty space. Before the alien strike ships could adjust, 3 dormant platforms near the moon ignited and answered with narrow beams so precise they cut weapons arrays off Dominion hulls without breaching life support. Elena Ward watched the tactical feed bloom with disabled enemy signatures. Those stations are fighting like they've studied them. Mercer's eyes stayed fixed on the board. Maybe they have. Deeper beneath the moon, as the battle raged overhead, the inheritance chamber reached a threshold. The star map vanished. The room darkened. Then a single figure formed at the center of the chamber, not flesh, not hologram exactly, but a presence projected through light and field geometry so refined it felt almost alive. Talia Rowan, Owen Sato, and everyone else in the room went still. The figure looked human. Not modern human, not ancient in any crude ceremonial sense, but composed with such calm authority that the entire chamber seemed to orient around it. Lineage confirmed, it said. Its voice was steady, neither male nor female, and carried the weight of something that had been waiting longer than nations lasted. Steward descendants identified under existential pressure. Preliminary inheritance release authorized. Talia stepped forward. Who are you? The figure turned toward her. I am Custodian Interface 9, appointed to observe the long return. Your ancestors withdrew from Dominion when power outgrew wisdom. They dispersed their line, concealed their empire, and sealed their strength until humanity could become itself again. Above them, battle thundered through the void. The interface continued. The species now faces an external hierarchy built on control, stagnation, and inherited fear. The question before this chamber is the same question your ancestors left unanswered. Talia held its gaze. Which is? The figure's light deepened, and across the room sealed vaults began to open. Whether modern humanity remembers how to wield supremacy, it said, without becoming the thing it once chose to stop being. Above Luna, the battle spread in widening circles of fire and cold precision. Dominion strike craft poured through the edge of the system in disciplined waves, trying to punch through human defenses before the ancient network could fully synchronize. But the deeper they pushed, the stranger the resistance became. Human ships fought with trained aggression and flexible doctrine, moving in patterns the Dominion found difficult to predict. The ancient platforms fought differently. They did not rush. They did not posture. They seemed to calculate the entire battlefield at once and then remove the most dangerous pieces with terrifying restraint. Weapons arrays went dark. Engines died. Targeting systems collapsed into static. One Dominion cruiser lost every offensive function in less than 3 seconds and drifted helplessly past the moon with its crew still alive, its command deck blinking in confusion. On the bridge of the Resolute Crown, Legate Vale Corps watched a third wave fail before it reached effective range. Why are the old stations not destroying us? One of his officers asked, panic breaking through discipline. Ser Rick Tal answered before Vale could. Because they don't need to. No one challenged him. Not now. The truth was too visible. The Dominion had come prepared to overawe a younger civilization. Instead, they had triggered a defense architecture so advanced it could end the battle whenever it wanted, and was choosing not to. Beneath Luna, the chamber of inheritance was no longer silent. With each sentence spoken by Custodian Interface 9, more systems stirred behind sealed walls. Racks of dark equipment unlocked from suspension fields. Navigation arrays rose out of the floor. Transparent displays filled with star maps, fleet paths, and symbols from a history modern humanity had never been taught. President Talia Rowan stood facing the luminous figure and forced herself to focus on the words instead of the battle alert scrolling at the edge of every screen. You said our ancestors withdrew, she said. Why? The custodian's expression did not change, but the room answered with images. Human worlds. Great cities around impossible suns. Fleets so vast they cast shadows across planets. Then another image layered over them, stillness. Uniformity. A galaxy under one will. Because victory became a prison, the custodian said. The first human dominion ended war, ended scarcity, ended meaningful opposition. It also ended urgency, risk, and growth. Power without resistance began to erode the qualities that had made humanity great. Curiosity narrowed. Freedom became ceremonial. Innovation slowed beneath comfort. Owen Sato stared at the unfolding archive in disbelief. So they gave it up. On purpose. Yes, the custodian said. They dispersed their population, sealed strategic inheritance, erased imperial memory, and allowed their descendants to begin again among simpler conditions. They chose uncertainty over stagnation. Nia Shah looked around the chamber, then at the marines and engineers already showing signs of awakening perception and instinct. And the genetic changes? Preparation, the custodian replied. Adaptations for cognition, resilience, and interface compatibility. Dormant until environmental and ethical thresholds were met. Talia's eyes narrowed. Ethical thresholds? The figure turned fully toward her. Inheritance was never guaranteed. It was conditional. At that exact moment, alarms spiked across the room. A second Dominion action had begun, not at Luna, but across human colonial space. They had decided to widen the pressure. If Sol could not be isolated quickly, then the outer settlements would be forced to divide humanity's attention. Reports came in from New Carthage, Helios Gate, Arcadia, and the mining worlds beyond Tau Ceti. Dominion task groups were seizing local transit lanes, jamming communications, and demanding emergency compliance under claims of anti-escalation authority. In 3 systems, orbital batteries had already opened fire. Admiral Mercer's voice cut through the chamber from the command feed above. They've committed theater-wide. This is the real move. Talia looked at the custodian. Can the network defend all of them? Partial activation is already in progress, it said. Full inheritance release requires command acceptance. Acceptance from who? Mercer demanded over the channel. The custodian did not hesitate. From the species. That answer hit the room like a physical force. On Earth, emergency councils opened in every major government hub. On Mars, colonial assemblies suspended local authority and routed command to unified defense. Across the 16 human systems, public feeds that had once spoken of first contact and uncertainty now carried a single unambiguous message. Humanity was under coordinated external attack. The response was immediate. Not panic. Not collapse. Mobilization. Civilian shipyards converted fabrication lines to military output. Reserve pilots reported for duty in numbers no planner had expected. Terraforming stations became shield anchors. Research outposts became sensor webs. Freighters loaded with colony supplies switched transponders and revealed missile bays hidden behind cargo shells. Humanity's strength had never been concentrated in one throne world or one ruling fleet. It lived in networks, in adaptation, in millions of people spread across many worlds who had grown up in difficult places and learned very early that survival favored the fast and the stubborn. That was the first thing the Dominion had misunderstood. The second was Ser-Rik Tau. As battle reports worsened and more ancient stations came online in human systems, Ser-Rik made his final break. He accessed the Resolute Crown strategic relay under his old command credentials and copied everything he could, fleet dispersal plans, Dominion contingency doctrine, and one file so heavily restricted that even he hesitated before sending it. Then he transmitted the package straight to Armstrong on a channel masked beneath combat noise. On Luna, Isaac Reeve opened the burst and went still. "What is it?" Hannah asked. Isaac turned the projection so she could see. "Main Fleet Assembly Order." Her face drained of color. "How large?" He swallowed. "Large enough that this first attack was never meant to win. It was meant to pin us until the Central Armada arrived." Back on the Resolute Crown, Vale Corps had already discovered the breach. He entered the command annex with guards at his back and found Sarek standing beside the open relay station, not running, not pretending. "You've betrayed the Dominion," Vale said. Sarek looked at him with exhausted calm. "No. I tried to save it from making the stupidest decision in its history." Vale's jaw tightened. "You chose them." "I chose reality," Sarek replied. "And you should have too." The guards moved, but before they could reach him, the entire ship shuddered. Every light dimmed. Tactical displays blanked out for half a second and returned with a single new contact dominating the scope. It had appeared at the edge of the system without any readable transition signature. No one on the bridge understood what they were seeing at first, because scale itself seemed wrong. The object was too large for a battleship, too geometrically clean for a station, and too heavily shielded for anything in Dominion records. It moved with slow certainty, not rushing toward the battle, but taking position as if it had every right to be there. One ancient designation flashed across the human and alien translation nets at the same time. Primary sovereign vessel approaching recognized inheritance zone. In the lunar chamber, every display shifted to the same image. The custodian inclined its head almost imperceptibly. "The Heart vessel has answered," it said. Talia looked up at the impossible shape gliding through Sol toward Earth and Luna, and for the first time since first contact, even she felt something beyond fear. It was not just power. It was legacy. And somewhere deep in the command architecture of that ancient ship, something had decided that modern humanity was finally worth coming back for. The ancient vessel did not rush. That was the first thing everyone remembered later. While alarms screamed across human worlds and Dominion fleets pushed toward battle positions, the massive ship entering Sol moved with the calm of something that had never needed urgency to prove its strength. It crossed the darkness between the outer defense lines and Earth with silent precision, its surface rippling in bands of deep metallic light, as if the hull itself were thinking. Every sensor array pointed at it. Every weapons system in the system tracked it. None of them could define its full mass. It was simply too large, too dense, and too advanced to fit inside the assumptions of either side. On the bridge of the Resolute Crown, Vale Core stared at the tactical projection in disbelief. "Identify propulsion." "We can't," his chief engineer said. "There is no conventional drive bloom. It's altering local space geometry." "Then target it." The officer at weapons control hesitated. "Sir, our systems won't lock." That got Vale's full attention. "Won't, or can't?" "Both." Behind him, Sarek Tau watched the giant ship settle into position between Earth, Luna, and the main Dominion approach vector. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt something colder. This was no longer a contest of fleets or treaties. It was history stepping into the present, and everyone still alive in the next hour would owe that survival to choices made by people 12,000 years dead. In the lunar inheritance chamber, the custodian stood surrounded by active consoles and streams of awakened code. President Talia Rowan kept her eyes on the image of the vessel as it filled the chamber's central display. "What does it want from us?" she asked. The custodian answered immediately. "Not obedience. Authorization." Mercer's voice cut in from command. "Main Dominion Armada has just crossed the outer approach. Hundreds of contacts. This is it." At once the star map expanded. Human colonies lit across the display. Dominion fleet concentrations followed. Every active battlefront became visible at once, New Carthage holding under ancient shield support, Helios Gate under pressure, Arcadia's orbital ring firing through jamming haze, Mars standing ready beneath newly awakened defense grids. It was no longer one fight. It was a species-wide test. Talia turned back to the custodian. "What exactly are we authorizing?" The figure raised one hand, and text spread through the air around her in ancient human script translated into modern language. "Inheritance Protocol Final Stage. Primary sovereign vessel may release command lattice, strategic archives, and full defensive authority to recognized human leadership. Conditional on oath alignment. Talia narrowed her eyes. What oath? The chamber went still. Then the words appeared one line at a time. No rule without consent. No species reduced to tribute. No supremacy for its own sake. Power held only in stewardship, never in ownership. The strong defend the freedom of the weak, or lose the right to command. Hannah Vale stepped closer, reading every line with visible tension. They built an empire powerful enough to own the galaxy, she said quietly. And then locked it behind conditions designed to stop them from becoming tyrants again. Not stop, the custodian corrected. Filter. Outside the chamber, battle became reality. The Dominion Central Armada entered Sol in a wall of metal and light, warships dropping from transit in waves so large they momentarily overwhelmed civilian tracking. Carrier groups, interdiction cruisers, siege platforms, and command vessels spread across the outer system, all driving inward under Admiral Siraine Holt's direct control. Holt had expected resistance, certainly. She had not expected to arrive under the shadow of a ship larger than any fleet anchor in Dominion history. On her flagship, she watched local tactical networks distort around the sovereign vessel and understood instantly that the campaign had already become something else. Still, duty and momentum drove her forward. All formations, she ordered, maintain compression. Focus on command disruption. If the vessel cannot be destroyed, isolate it from human coordination. No one said what all of them were thinking. If. In response, the ancient network across Sol synchronized. Every awakened platform from Mercury to the Kuiper line flashed once in perfect sequence. Human ships received targeting solutions they had not requested, firing windows they had not computed, shield harmonics they had not known existed. The system was not taking control from them. It was elevating them, stitching modern human strategy into ancient defense architecture with terrifying speed. Captain Elena Ward felt it on the Vanguard before anyone could explain it. Her screen simplified. Chaos resolved into clarity. Enemy vectors sharpened. Weak points lit up across Dominion formations as if someone had laid a guiding hand over the battle. This isn't automation, she whispered. It's partnership. Then use it, Mercer said. Human counterfire erupted across the system. From hidden batteries near Saturn. From Martian defense towers. From colony cruisers translated in from reserve lines. From ancient stations no Dominion historian had known were real. But even then, humanity was not trying to annihilate the enemy. They were cutting propulsion, burning out weapons, collapsing command links, and blinding tactical relays. The Dominion had come to subdue. Humanity, guided by the old systems, was demonstrating what true superiority looked like when it did not need cruelty. That lesson reached Vale Core too late. Desperate to break the pattern, he gave the order Sarek had feared from the beginning. All local ships, coordinated strike on Earth. Force the humans into surrender posture. Several officers froze. Now. Vale roared. The order transmitted. It never arrived. Before the attack package could finish routing, the sovereign vessel moved for the first time. No engines flared. No weapons charged. It simply appeared closer, space folding around its hull in a slow impossible twist. A translucent shield blossomed around Earth and Luna, so vast it looked like a second horizon made of light. Every Dominion firing system locked onto it involuntarily. Every human watching understood the same thing at once. The ancient ship had placed itself between humanity and extinction. Then it answered. A single pulse rolled out from the sovereign vessel. There was no explosion. No firestorm. No heroic wave of destruction. The pulse crossed Sol like a thought. Every Dominion ship it touched lost weapons, drives, shields, and command synchronization in the same instant. Hulls remained intact. Life support continued. Crews lived. But fleets that had terrified half the galaxy for centuries became silent metal drifting under the authority of physics alone. On the Resolute Crown, every display died except one. Cease hostile action. Harm is unnecessary. Vale Core stared at the words, breathing hard. Around him, officers sat motionless before dead control panels. Serrick closed his eyes for a moment, not in triumph, but in exhausted recognition. It had happened exactly as he feared. The Dominion had challenged a power it did not understand and had been defeated so completely it had not even been considered worth killing. In the high chamber on the Dominion capital, Chancellor Voss watched the live strategic feed collapse into red disabled markers and felt the mythology of his civilization break apart. Not because they had lost. Empires recover from defeat. What shattered them was the manner of it. Humanity, or something answering to humanity, had disarmed the greatest military force the Dominion could field without slaughter, revenge, or spectacle. Admiral Holt, adrift in a powerless flagship on the edge of Sol, opened a direct emergency channel to Luna. "This is Admiral Sirain Holt of the Dominion Fleet," she said, voice stripped of all ceremony. "We request terms." Down in the inheritance chamber, the custodian turned to Talia Rowan. The oath still hovered around her, waiting. "The species has been tested under threat," it said. "Command release remains available. Full supremacy may be reclaimed." Talia looked at the words for a long second, then at Earth on the display, then at the helpless Dominion fleet surrounding it. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Not supremacy," she said. "Stewardship." For the first time, the custodian smiled. And all across the ancient network, humanity was recognized. Recognition changed everything, but not in the way the Dominion feared. The moment President Talia Rowan chose stewardship over supremacy, the ancient network responded across human space like a single breath released after 12,000 years. Every awakened platform, vault, relay, and hidden fortress shifted status at once. Weapons remained online, but command hierarchies rewrote themselves. Control locks that might have enabled domination were sealed behind the same oath Talia had just accepted. Strategic archives opened. Transit lanes cleared. Dormant manufacturing worlds stirred to life. And from the heart of the sovereign vessel, the custodian transmitted one message to every human colony, every Dominion flagship, and every inhabited world connected to the greater galactic grid. Inheritance granted. Conquest denied. A free age may begin. In Sol, the disabled Dominion fleet drifted around Earth in total silence. What had arrived as an armada of intimidation now looked like a graveyard of broken certainty. Yet no execution order came. No retaliatory strikes followed. Human rescue craft were the first vessels to move among the powerless alien ships, restoring stabilizers, patching failing compartments, and towing damaged cruisers out of dangerous orbits. Dominion crews who had expected vengeance found human engineers at their airlocks with tools, med teams, and instructions to stand down. Admiral Sirain Holt watched the first human shuttle dock with her flagship and felt the final illusion of Dominion superiority dissolve. She had prepared for humiliation, imprisonment, perhaps the public spectacle of defeat. Instead, the first person to step onto her command deck was Captain Elena Ward carrying a portable power unit and a calm expression. "We've restored life support redundancy to your lower decks," Elena said. "Navigation will stay offline until formal terms are signed. Your wounded are being transferred if you consent." Holt stared at her. "You are offering aid to an invading fleet." Elena met her gaze without any trace of triumph. "You're not the first civilization to confuse power with entitlement. We'd rather you survive long enough to learn the difference." On Luna, the negotiations that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had seen in living memory. The Dominion expected surrender terms because that was the only language empires understood after defeat. But Hannah Vale and Miriam Cole presented something far more destabilizing, a charter of release. No annexations. No tribute. No forced disarmament beyond immediate offensive limits. No human governor over Dominion space. Instead, every subject world inside the Dominion sphere would be given access to open records, local self-governance, independent defense rights under mutual law, and the choice to join a new interstellar assembly as an equal member rather than a subordinate client. When Chancellor Mailer Voss appeared by secure hollow from the Dominion capital, his voice shook with disbelief. "You have the capacity to seize our government, our fleet lanes, our strategic worlds. Why would you not do so?" Talia answered from the command chamber of the sovereign vessel itself, with Earth turning behind her and the old light of human history glowing across the walls. "Because our ancestors already proved that ruling everyone is not the same as building something worth keeping." That message spread farther and faster than any military report. Across Dominion-controlled worlds, species that had lived under regulated ceilings for centuries began hearing words many of them had never heard from any authority: consent, self-determination, open science, local law, cultural autonomy. Systems long held in quiet dependence started demanding records from Dominion administrators. Suppressed archives surfaced. Client fleets mutinied against command structures they had once considered permanent. Entire populations realized that what they had been told was stability had really been managed helplessness. Commander Serrick Tau, stripped of rank by his own government before the treaty was even signed, stood in the Lunar Assembly chamber as a private citizen when the first representatives from liberated worlds arrived. Some looked frightened. Some looked angry. Most looked like people trying to stand upright under the weight of a future no one had ever allowed them to imagine. Serrick expected hatred from the humans. Instead, Hannah Vale approached him with a sealed data slate. "What is this?" he asked. "A formal invitation," she said. "The new assembly will need people who understand how the old system worked." He gave a dry laugh. "You want advice from the man who brought your enemies to your door." "No," Hannah said. "We want honesty from the man who finally warned us they were coming." The rebuilding began almost immediately. Human and former Dominion engineers worked side by side to reopen trade routes on terms no capital world could monopolize. Ancient human manufacturing arrays, once designed to support imperial logistics, were repurposed into public shipyards, medical foundries, and environmental recovery systems. Worlds stripped bare by Dominion extraction received restoration teams instead of tax collectors. On planets whose skies had been poisoned by centuries of controlled industry, orbital mirrors and atmospheric processors rebuilt weather cycles one season at a time. Professor Nia Shah established the first open institute for ancestral studies on Luna, where scientists from dozens of species examined the legacy systems not as weapons of supremacy, but as cautionary gifts. The genetic awakenings continued, but under supervision and consent. Humanity learned that the enhancements left by their ancestors were not tools for creating a master race. They were adaptability keys meant to help a free civilization think faster, heal better, and connect more deeply with systems designed for stewardship rather than domination. Some of the most important changes happened far from Earth. At New Carthage, where the Dominion's first colonial seizure had failed, human settlers and former Dominion auxiliary crews built a joint port above the Polar Shield station that had saved the world. The old base was left intact, but its command spire now carried a new inscription in 12 languages. No world belongs to those strong enough to take it. It belongs to those willing to protect it without owning it. On Mars, children from human families and newly arrived alien communities studied together beneath domes that had once been frontier shelters. They learned human history, Dominion history, and the buried history of the first human Dominion, the Golden Age, the stagnation, the withdrawal, and the choice to disappear rather than become eternal tyrants. For the first time, the galaxy's most dangerous lesson was no longer hidden. Admiral Mercer took command of the newly formed Interstellar Defense Compact, a fleet built not to enforce obedience, but to prevent anyone else from building another Dominion in its place. Human ships served beside vessels from liberated worlds. Former enemies trained under the same doctrine. The rule was simple and absolute: no civilization would ever again be compelled into peace at gunpoint. Even the sovereign vessel changed. What had entered Seoul as a symbol of unimaginable ancient power did not become a throne. Under Talia's direction, its command halls were open to representatives from every member world of the new assembly. Its archives were unsealed in stages, each release governed by the same oath she had taken on Luna. The old empire's greatest machine became a living reminder that power was safest when watched by many, not owned by one. In time, Chancellor Voss resigned. Admiral Holt became one of the first Dominion officers to testify publicly about how fear had calcified into control. Serik Tao took a place in the new diplomatic corps, where his experience with hierarchy became strangely useful in dismantling it. Hannah Vale wrote the charter that replaced accession law with mutual covenant. Elena Ward commanded the first mixed-species exploration group beyond mapped space, carrying not banners of conquest, but invitations. And somewhere inside the luminous mind of Custodian Interface 9, the long return was finally marked complete. Not because humanity had reclaimed the galaxy. Because it had refused to. That was the choice their ancestors had been waiting to see. Not whether their descendants could become powerful again. That part had never really been in doubt. The real test was whether humanity, after losing everything and rebuilding itself from dust and distance and ordinary struggle, would remember that strength means nothing if it only kneels others beneath it. The Dominion came to Earth expecting another young species to absorb into a quiet machine. Instead, it found the one civilization in the galaxy dangerous enough to defeat an empire and wise enough not to replace it with another. And that was the moment the stars truly changed.
This video is created for educational and informational purposes using advanced AI tools and human creativity. All concepts, scripting, and storytelling are independently developed to ensure originality. Visuals and animations are generated or enhanced using AI technologies such as Veo 3, Meta AI, and Grok AI, while final editing and post-production are completed using CapCut and other professional editing tools. No external creator content has been copied or reused. Any resemblance to real-world environments, factories, or processes is purely coincidental. All scenes shown in this video are digitally created and do not represent real footage. This content is produced with transparency and follows YouTube monetization guidelines.